Yuma, I'm Russell and welcome to the 2024 series of the Canberra series. This year, as I became a full-time editor, I didn't get an opportunity to make too many bits of Canberra content, but that didn't stop me. I made a short looking at some bus stop trivia, then I found a connection between The Wizard of Oz and Canberra, and finally I took a deep dive into the history of the North versus South divide. So please enjoy the 2024 series of the Canberra series. Did you watch the ABC series Austin and notice this small detail? While Austin and Julian wait for the bus, they play a game of Banana Car, aka Spotto. But it isn't the game I noticed, but this little blue plaque above the entrance. These were installed to signify that they were a part of the Monotone Paints mural competition that was held between 1987 and 1993. If you would like to learn more about these murals and the bus shelters themselves, then check out my Canberra series video on the bus shelter. The Bush capital and the Emerald City share inspiration. Yep, you heard that right. Both the author of The Wizard of Oz, Frank L. Baum, and the architect of the 1913 design of Canberra, Walter Burley Griffin, were inspired to build their cities at the same event. In 1893, Chicago hosted the World's Fair, known as the Columbian Exposition. Griffin was 17 and Baum was 20 years his senior at 37, when the fair opened in May of that year. Both Griffin and Baum were in awe of the White City that was built for the event. The White City was made of large neoclassical buildings placed around an ornamental lake, giving birth to the City Beautiful movement. The White City was so striking to Griffin that he used it as inspiration for the government group in his Canberra design 20 years later. Baum, on the other hand, would have noticed the artificiality of the buildings. Grand neoclassical pavilions were made from steel frames and plaster as they framed the artificial lake the size of 8 football fields, forming the Court of Honour, making for an impressive illusion of grandeur, much like the Emerald City with its emerald-tinted secrets. Now you know how. Talk to any Canberran and eventually they'll mention that they live on the north or south side of Canberra. It's become a bit of a running joke that you'll make a new friend, find out that they live on the opposite side of town to you, so you say goodbye to them because you know you'll never see them again. But how did we get to this point? Did the divide just magically appear overnight when the lake was created in the 1960s, or does it have an earlier origin? Well, in this episode of the Canberra series, we're going to find out. When Griffin won the design competition in 1912, his initial idea was to build the city in the north. But Charles Scrivener, the man who surveyed the region, had the idea and the suggestion to build the city in the south behind Kurrajong Hill. The government trusted Scrivener, so they went with his suggestion, overpowering Griffin and influencing development of the city for years to come. They actually started building their own plan before Griffin was invited out to Australia to overview construction. Check out my Forgotten Canberra Designs video to learn more about the controversial design competition and how much influence the departmental board had. This is why Monica and Kingston are some of the oldest suburbs in Canberra, and that just marks the beginning of the North versus South divide. In 1921, the Federal Capital Advisory Committee, also known as the FCAC, was set up to advise the Minister for Works and Railways and to review Griffin's plan. They fought tooth and nail to avoid building Griffin's design, which we are still feeling the impacts of today. Forced by the government to use Griffin's 1918 road layout, the FCAC could only envisage the initial city being built between the Powerhouse and Camp Hill, once again married to the idea of Scrivener's suggested site. Needing to appear that they were building Griffin's plan, they built Civic to be for business in the north, with the residential areas to be built in the south. This period of development introduced a class divide to this geographical divide. The FCAC allotted the north side to workers and the south side to officials. With Southsiders getting bigger plots and permission to use more expensive materials, while Northsiders got smaller plots and had to use cheaper materials such as wood. Development slowed during the Great Depression and the Second World War, after which it increased thanks to friend of the channel, Robert Menzies. He was a bit embarrassed that the Queen came to visit such an underdeveloped city in 1954. A bit like when a teenager invites their crush over but they forgot to tidy their room. Huh. To push the development forward, he moved the Department of Defence from Melbourne and created the National Capital Development Commission in the 1960s. The NCDC oversaw the development of Canberra for the next 30 years. With Canberra growing, the NCDC had to look towards the future, and the Griffin plan wasn't able to accommodate the growing population, so they looked further out, giving rise to the Y plan. Partially inspired by the British New Towns movement, the NCDC looked at the contours of the surrounding valleys. Following the trend of building south first, Woden was opened in 1964, followed by Belconnen in the northwest in 1966, further south with Tuggeranong in 1973, and finally Gungahlin in the northeast in 1992. Though the Y plan allowed Canberra's population to increase, it created isolated town centres that required a car to travel between, further pushing people apart and increasing the divide. Today, the arguments between North and South boils down to development and government investment. Gungahlin is one of the fastest growing suburbs in Australia and received the first section of light rail, with development of Stage 2 going to take another decade to reach Woden, leaving Tuggeranong in the cold, for now. In 2023, the population centre made it across the lake, making the north side the most populated part of Canberra. As the population grows and development continues in northern suburbs such as Gungahlin and Ginninderry. Each side of the city has its own identity as well. The inner north is known as the Lentil Belt due to their progressive values and often younger population. Canberra in the south likes to claim that it's the largest suburb in Australia, but really it's only the biggest in the ACT. According to an ABC analysis of the 2021 census, they found that Northsiders are more likely to not believe in any god and be under 25, while the richest Canberrans live in the inner south. From its earliest days, Canberra has been a city of two sides, divided by bureaucracy and geography, from hiding from the winds in the south to building light rail in the north. If you've enjoyed this video, feel free to like, comment and share. And if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. And that wraps up the 2024 series of the Canberra series, and I hope you'll join me in 2025. If you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the Canberra series, hit us up on Instagram. And if you saw it from this video, leave an owl emoji. Thanks so much for watching. See you next year.